Hello, lovelies. Alright, going on to another request that we had from John David on the YouTube channel. He wanted me to do a video on empaths and psychics. Which, yeah, we were probably going to get to that. But, oh well, I'm doing it now. Alright, an empath is a person who can sense emotion. Be it from a person, a place, an animal. Basically, that's what they pick up on is emotional traces. And some of y'all who are empathic always come up to the biggest issue of how do you deal with it? Because I understand it can be overwhelming at times. And it's, for those of you who don't know, what it's like is it's like having constant emotional white noise in your head. It's like, you know when, well, us older ones, we're going to remember this, when you get static on the TV, the little speckles of white and black, that is what you call white noise to an extent. That snow. And it would make this horrible sound. And it's the equivalent of that going on in our heads. And it's very distracting. And with emotional empathy like that, well, that is empathy, but you get my meaning. You're basically being bombarded by all these emotions from outside sources. And it impacts you if you don't learn how to control it. The best way that I have found to deal with it is to find an anchor. To learn how to tune the frequency out, so to speak. When you find an anchor and you have something to focus on, and you focus on it so hard it cancels out other things going on around you. And really that applies to anything that's irritating, like a constant irritation like that. It's not so much so that it is completely distracting that you want to focus specifically on something else. It's just like a constant buzzing in your ear. It's just annoying. And the best way to, the easiest, we'll just put that, the easiest way to deal with it is to learn how to focus specifically on something to keep that white noise from distracting you. But let's go ahead and get into the psychic thing as well. Now, I have a love-hate of psychics because most of the people out there that claim to be psychic aren't. And here's my problem with it. When you go to somebody and you want to get a reading, a lot of what they do is pick up on, I don't want to necessarily say body language because it's so much more than that. It's mostly their perception. Like how you talk about things, how you react with certain things. And that's mostly what they pick on, what we call the panderers. The ones that are just trying to make a buck. And they'll give you a lot of filler and a lot of fluff. That's the biggest thing you need to look out for, is who's putting in a lot of fluff. Real psychic abilities goes along the lines of something like this. Say I'm doing a reading on someone. I don't do readings on people if I can help it because I don't like doing it. Because, let's face it, you can't unsee some things. But say I'm doing a reading on someone and I see something and I'll tell them, I don't know what this means. It may not mean anything, but this is what I see. Because what may not make sense to you might make sense to them. Simple as that. So that's one of the things you need to look out for when somebody's claiming that they're psychic. If they give you a lot of fluff. Another big red flag is if they tell you who and what you are. That's influencing you. And one of the big golden rules among the supernatural community, not necessarily the wolf community, but the supernatural community, is you never tell someone what they are. Because it's like this, what you think they are might not be what they are. That's your perception. And when you tell them this, you might be sending them down the wrong path. And that wastes their time. Because what we are is a self-discovering thing. It's something that you have to find out yourself. And albeit, I'm one that would be like, yeah, you're not a wolf. But usually that's because it's based on stereotypes of what we are. People assume these are traits of a wolfkin, but they're actually not. That's why I'll call bullshit. Is because it's based on complete misconception. But big gold rule, you can never tell someone what they are. And that's part of them getting to that point. You may know what they are, but they still have to walk that road themselves. They have to get to that point. Because when you just come out and tell them, they miss out on a lot of the learning experience that they need. Not necessarily want, but need. They need that experience. It's like this, you can tell a child how to do things, but until they actually start experiencing life, they're not going to understand. It's like telling a baby, this is how you run. They're not going to understand until they work through their crawling phase and their walking phase to get to that point. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that y'all are all babies. I'm just using that as an example to get to that point. But elaborating on the psychic thing, you get a lot of subgroups of psychic too. Like telepaths, for example, which are albeit rare. Like a true telepath is rare. And then you start getting into other psychic abilities like telekinetic, where you can move things with your mind, pyrokinetic, that's what it was. People, the fire starters, and they do exist. They are very, extremely rare. Like the odds of you meeting one is 1 in a million. But they do exist. And I will give these people credit. I mean, they have the mental focus that none of us could ever dream of having. That they can focus on something so precisely that they can change it in such a way. Or that they can move it in such a way. I mean, that's just like subatomic level for supernaturals. It's just insane. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I've met some telekinetics before. They're a little more common. Pyrokinetic, that's not something you come across very often. But as far as, okay, and another thing about psychics and empaths, and I'm not saying this to be insulting, but y'all are still human. I mean, albeit you're a slightly more tuned in human, but you're still human. And on the supernatural food chain, you're not that very high. And the reason that I even bring this up is because a lot of psychics and empaths and mediums, what have you, tend to get a little bit arrogant because they have this ability. These are traits a lot of supernaturals have. Base traits. Not even like, high functioning traits. These are base traits that a lot of us get when we're teenagers. It's not, I mean, it's more than most, but it's not that big of a deal. And I'll go ahead and elaborate on something else for those of you who do have psychic skill or empathic skill. The more you practice with it and the more you work with it, the better at it you become, like any kind of skill. And that being said, the more that you work with it, the better you get at controlling it as well. So you don't accidentally poke around in someone's head. Because truth is, if they have bigger metaphorical teeth than you, they are well within their rights to hurt you. So it brings me to an unspoken rule among anybody that does any kind of reading. Always have permission. Don't ever go poking around in someone's head without their permission, because they are well within their rights to throw their walls up or hurt you. And it will happen. It has happened. It has even happened to me when I was young and cocky and stupid. Now I'm just cocky. And people can kill you this way. They can. And I mean, it's basically like the equivalent of going up and groping someone. I mean, you're poking around in their personal thoughts, their private thoughts. Thoughts should remain private. And it's the same equivalent of just straight up walking up and groping somebody. You just don't do it. And another thing I'll get into later on when I start covering specific magic topics is don't just flat out offer either. They need to ask you. Because when you offer it, you're indirectly influencing their will and their decision making, albeit in a subtle manner, but you're still influencing them in some way. Especially if you have psychic ability. Whether you mean to or not, you are influencing this person. And it's a big no-no. So, and as I get into the magical topics and all that, I will also be discussing how to properly protect yourself from attacks. Because, like I said, it has happened, it does happen, it will happen, especially if you are getting into this kind of lifestyle. It will inevitably happen. Nobody is bulletproof on this. Eventually someone will try poking around in your head. So, John, I hope I covered this really well for you. I hope you guys enjoyed it, because it was one of the more interesting, vast topics that is well recorded. Because I know that I've been having a couple of videos lately where they haven't been well documented, so it's been a little bit hard to get information on. But I do hope you enjoyed it. And as always, leave comments, suggest topics, share the videos, and subscribe. And y'all have a good night, and ignore the big cats that just went running across the laptop.